really into this car, but how do I know if I'm getting a good deal? I tell TrueCar my zip, or which car I want, and TrueCar shows the range of prices people in my area actually pay for the same car, so I know if I'm getting a great price. This is how car buying was always meant to be. This is TrueCar.
Coming up, America's new secret pleasure, Deal Dash. But first, the weather.
Yes! Sit here, please.
Another package from Deal Dash.
Thanks. Can you put it over there?
I won.
Don't worry, babe. On Deal Dash, shipping's always free.
Hey, wanna go shopping? Can't. I'm in the middle of a really hot auction for some super cute stuff.
Mom, are you in Deal Dash too?
Shush, I'm in the middle of a very important auction.
DealDash.com auctions thousands of cool new products and offers a 90-day money-back guarantee on your first bid-pack purchase.
I won!
Mom, what'd you win?
Dad!
Look, Mrs. K, I won.
Go to Deal Dash and sign up now. Use promo code NEWS to get 100 free bids on your first purchase. Visit DealDash.com.
Welcome back. We're here with Senator Lee. Senator Lee, a lot of talk about the Second Amendment lately, the horrible shooting in Florida, and we have these horrible shootings from time to time. And it seems like the immediate reaction is to limit the Second Amendment. The Bill of Rights, what are they for? What are the Bill of Rights for, all of them?
They're there to protect us against the danger associated with the excessive accumulation of power in the hands of the few. The Constitution does that in structural ways through federalism and separation of powers, but it also protects certain substantive rights. Certain things are identified that are beyond the reach of any government. Based on human historical experience, the drafters of the Bill of Rights identified certain areas where government just shouldn't be able to act. It's one of the reasons why they took off the table messing with people's religious freedom or their freedom of expression in the First Amendment. In the Second Amendment, they wanted to make sure that the right to bear arms was protected, and so that's what they did. The Bill of Rights matters. The Bill of Rights is important, and we shouldn't lightly take away or erode any right that's protected in the Bill of Rights.
When you stand on the Senate floor and you hear your colleagues debating gun control, debating certain types of guns, many of them debate guns, they don't know much about guns, but they talk about it like it's some kind of a pork bill. We're talking about the Bill of Rights. We're talking about the Second Amendment. Do you stand there and look at them and say to them in your own mind, do you even understand that this is a constitutional right? It's not something which you can treat like a piece of bologna, where you're just cutting it up. What goes through your mind?
The first thing that goes through my mind is the fact that what triggers some of these conversations is the commission of a crime, a heinous act, one that usually involves the simultaneous violation of dozens of laws. And in that circumstance, the impulse that says somebody's violated dozens of laws, we must therefore pass another law, doesn't itself instinctively make me want to join that effort. You add to that the fact that it's a constitutionally protected right that we might be being asked to infringe, and also the fact that you've got the rights of the law-abiding and what a given law might do to interfere with the day-to-day lives of law-abiding American citizens as compared to what it might do to deter or prevent or protect us against violent criminal activity. And it makes for a much more nuanced conversation than many people want to have. But I think it's important for us to have that conversation rather than just instinctively giving in to the impulse to create yet another law.
When you hear about sanctuary cities, and you know about sanctuary cities, back to the Constitution again, and federalism, how do you weigh this? Federalism, nullification, federal authority, state authority, when it comes to sanctuary cities?
Sanctuary cities present a particularly interesting set of questions because the fact that you've got cities that are trying to undo federal policy. Now, the Constitution does give power to Congress. It makes federal the power to decide what our laws say concerning immigration and naturalization. That is a federal power. It needs to be a federal power. It's made a federal power by the Constitution itself. So for a city to say, no, we want to exercise that power and to, in effect, erode federal authority in this area is wrong. We've added to this mess by setting up all kinds of federal programs that provide all kinds of federal funding for state and local law enforcement for the operations of state and local government generally, making them in many ways dependent on what I once heard you refer to as crony federalism, where states and localities come to the federal government on bended knee, even though they themselves are sovereigns within our system of government. And so what many people have said is that if a state or local government wants to try to undermine the enforcement of federal laws concerning immigration, then perhaps they shouldn't receive federal funds. It seems like a pretty reasonable solution to this, and yet some people freak out about it. But we have to remember that this really is about immigration, and immigration is itself a federal issue, not one that's to be decided based on a patchwork quilt of states and localities.
And this issue of withholding federal grants, this isn't new. This has been going on really since the New Deal. The courts have upheld it. And yet it seems in the Trump era, the courts have gone a little wobbly on their own precedent when it comes to refugees and the power of the president in terms of prosecutorial discretion. We had a recent Supreme Court decision involving Arizona where they essentially said, well, the president gets to call the shots. And yet the president apparently doesn't get to call the shots. Does it trouble you that there appears to be, at least in the Trump era, more and more politicization of the courts by a number of these federal district courts and form shopping in certain parts of the country when it comes to challenging Trump initiatives?
Oh, of course. Look, form shopping is disturbing. When we talk about form shopping, we're referring to the process by which somebody will go to one court and then to another court based on a strategy of which judge they think might be more likely to rule in their favor. That undermines respect for the rule of law. It undermines the rule of law itself, and it's troubling. One of the things that has enabled that is bad legislative drafting. Sometimes that's accidental, sometimes it's very deliberate. In the case where members of Congress don't necessarily want to have to make a difficult choice, they punt, and they draft something that's really vague and say, we'll let the executive branch agency work it out. And then there ends up being something of a tug of war between an executive branch agency, perhaps with input from the White House in power at the time, and the courts. And that ends up being a problem. But it's a problem that could be, for the most part, avoided if Congress did its job in drafting language.
But I look at some of these federal judges on the West Coast, Maryland and so forth, early on in the Trump administration, making outrageous decisions that clearly violated the precedent set forth by the Supreme Court. They were always told Supreme Court precedent. Well, of course, the Constitution trumps that, but in this case, they were both one and the same, in my view. And they made it clear, Justice Kennedy's opinion and so forth, that the president has enormous power when it comes to enforcing federal immigration laws. And yet mayors and city councils usurping the president's authority, certain federal district judges upholding that. Is there a level, my words, not yours, of judicial tyranny that has taken place in this country, particularly in the last many decades with the rise of big central government?
There's certainly been an abuse of judicial power, and that's a problem. Anytime that abuse occurs, it needs to be weeded out. It needs to be addressed. Fortunately, we have a good court system. While it's by no means perfect, we have the opportunity to appeal. The bad news, though, is that in many cases, it takes a long time to appeal something and to get a bad ruling overturned. In other cases, the nature of the dispute has changed entirely by the time that process has the ability to work itself through. So it's a little bit like saying that the possession is 9/10 of the law. In many circumstances, if a federal district judge issues a bad ruling, it can cost a lot in terms of what's given up, what's surrendered, between the time that decision is issued and the time that the erroneous decision can be corrected on appeal. We'll be right back.
We're pulling the plug.
And the kids, they're okay.
Because we're going to continue living together.
So please, enjoy the salad course.
Splitting Up Together premieres Tuesday on ABC. There are plenty of good booking sites, but your ideal hotel may only be listed on one, or several, but for very different prices. You really want to check them all? Instead, use Trivago to compare these offers and find your ideal hotel for the best price. Hotel Trivago. Are you hiring great people or hoping for great people?
I get more talented people through the door through Indeed than any other job search I use.
Indeed delivers 6 times more hires than any other job site. It's no wonder over 3 million businesses use Indeed for hiring.
Indeed.com just gives me so many more qualified applicants to choose from.
Post a job in minutes, and Indeed will help you zero in on just the right candidates, so you can hire faster. Nothing has ever been this easy, this simple, and this effective. Plus, there are no upfront costs or long-term contracts. Does it get any better than that?
I don't think so. To accelerate your hiring, Indeed offers premium placement to give your listing more exposure
To relevant job seekers, which allows you to hire even faster.
And right now, start your first job posting with free premium placement. Redeem now at Indeed.com/TV1.
Search for greatness. Indeed, the world's #1 job site.
Termites. Feasting on homes 24/7.
We're on the lookout.
Hey, all good?
Oh yeah, we're good. We're good. Termites never stop trying to get in. At Terminix, we never stop working to keep them out because they can cause thousands of dollars in damage. Call Terminix now to schedule a free termite inspection. As America's leading termite control provider, we'll do whatever it takes to stop them in their tracks. 100% satisfaction guaranteed. To schedule a free termite inspection, call 1-800-997-9522 and protect your home. And if they ever do come back, so will we. To schedule a free termite inspection, call 1-800-997-9522 or visit Terminix.com. Terminix, defenders of home. If your moderate to severe ulcerative colitis or Crohn's symptoms are holding you back, and your current treatment hasn't worked well enough, it may be time for a change. Ask your doctor about Entyvio, the only biologic developed and approved just for UC and Crohn's. Entyvio works at the site of inflammation in the GI tract and is clinically proven to help many patients achieve both symptom relief and remission. Infusion and serious allergic reactions can happen during or after treatment. Entyvio may increase risk of infection, which can be serious. PML, a rare, serious, potentially fatal brain infection caused by a virus, may be possible. This condition has not been reported with Entyvio. Tell your doctor if you have an infection, experience frequent infections, or have flu-like symptoms or sores. Liver problems can occur with Entyvio. If your UC or Crohn's treatment isn't working for you, ask your gastroenterologist about Entyvio. Entyvio, relief and remission within reach.
From America's News Headquarters, I'm Kelly Wright in Washington.
A horrific scene in Russia where a shopping mall became a deadly inferno.
At least 37 people were killed, more than 60 others are still missing, and firefighters say that as many
As 40 of the missing people are children. The 4-story Winter Cherry Mall in Karamovo, a Siberian city almost 2,000 miles east of Moscow, the cause of the fire is still unknown. Pennsylvania Congressman Brian Costello will not seek re-election in the upcoming fall midterm elections. This after days of rumors that the GOP congressman was considering retirement. Costello is a moderate Republican in suburban Philadelphia, but his district was recently redrawn to be more favorable to Democrats after Pennsylvania's Supreme Court ruled that the GOP-drawn congressional districts were gerrymandering. I'm Kelly Wright. Now back to life, liberty, and Levin.
The sanctuary city idea, nullification, these are words that were used during the Confederacy. Nullification, secession. Do you find it odd that the left is talking about these sort of things, particularly in California, a very blue state, where we have multiple sanctuary cities? In fact, the governor has announced that the whole state is a sanctuary state, and there are these various secession movements going on in that state. Do you find it odd that now the left is using the language of the Confederacy?
Yes, I find it odd. I find it deeply troubling. I find it contrary to the Constitution, to everything that the left has professed in the past to hold near and dear. As much as anything, though, I find it to be a remarkable moment, a teachable moment, to paraphrase Barack Obama. A moment when we can say, okay, let's talk about what is appropriate for the federal government. Let's talk about whether everything needs to be at the federal level. Now, in this case, it does. In the case of laws governing immigration and naturalization, those are federal issues. The Constitution says so. But we can use this as a pivot point to say, let's talk about whether there are, in fact, dangers associated with allowing excessive power to accumulate in the hands of the few, or too much power to be pushed to Washington, D.C. That's really what they're saying. And so, in a sense, maybe they're making an argument for federalism. They don't realize it. They're misguided. They're reaching the wrong conclusion here. But ultimately, they're trying in their own way to make an argument for federalism.
Are they doing that, or are they just saying, we'll take whatever road we need to take to get what we want? I think it's more of that.
I think there are some people on the left who genuinely, sincerely are concerned about the accumulation of power within the federal government. Now, maybe they're misguided in doing that. Maybe they're just trying to stand up for the administrative state. I don't know. But I assume at least some of them are open to the idea, perhaps now more than they have at any time in recent memory, to the idea that maybe we shouldn't put this much power in Washington. Maybe we shouldn't have all of our eggs, or this many of our eggs, in Washington's basket. They ought to be open to that more now than they ever have been in the past.
As a United States Senator, what do you do if a state succeeds in passing some kind of a proposition to secede? What happens then? Didn't we fight a civil war over this? I mean, I thought we did. But what happens under those circumstances?
Bad things. We don't want to go there. When a state within our union secedes, we know how that ends. It isn't pretty. It can only end in tears and worse.
Do you see a rising level of lawlessness? I mean, I do, but I'm curious of your opinion, particularly in the more liberal cities and states and so forth. We talked about sanctuary cities, of course, but also in terms of the mayor of Oakland giving a heads up to illegal aliens, including criminals, that ICE is going to be doing some searches and so forth, and also the Democrat Party. The Democrat Party is very slow to react to securing the border, to changes in our voting systems to ensure the integrity of the vote of American citizens. There seems to be almost an ideological commitment to lawlessness, or allowing lawlessness to occur, to accumulate power. Am I wrong about that?
Willful blindness to the law is always distressing, and I think it takes on an even more concerning note when you're talking about the levers of control of our system of government. And that's exactly what we're describing when we refer to the process by which someone gains access to the ballot box. If people are willing to say, we don't care who you are or whether you're entitled to vote under the law, we're going to allow you to vote, that's very disturbing. That ought to send chills up our spine every time we hear something like that. It troubles me greatly that there are those in our country right now who suggest that the risk of voter fraud is somehow made up, that it doesn't exist. We know that there is fraud that's committed in every part of this country in one way or another. Why would it be any different with respect to voter fraud, especially given how many of our society's resources are now devoted to government? Why wouldn't it occur there? And of course it does. We ought to be concerned about it.
Well, you're concerned about it, and I'm concerned about it, but there seems to be a number of people who aren't concerned about it, and in fact, they seek to exploit it. So I know there are no easy answers when people, well, what do you do about it? Well, it does become complicated, doesn't it?
Yeah, it certainly does. And we have to be careful here, too, not to overreact by assuming that because there's a problem, that it always necessarily involves a federal solution. One of the worst things I think we could do would be to federalize election law, to federalize the casting of ballots. This is one of the last bastions of state sovereign authority, where states, for the most part, conduct their own elections without excessive interference from the federal government. I don't want to see a uniform system of laws thrust on the American people, thrust on every state, improperly by the federal government.
As a matter of fact, that issue was raised by several of the ratification debates. And those states said, we're not voting for this Constitution if you control the voting process in our state. Don't forget CRTV, where you can watch Levin TV every night. I hope you'll join us. Give us a call, 844-LEVIN-TV, or check us out at crtv.com.
Great. Another dead end.
Sarge, I just got a tip that'll crack this case wide open. Turns out the principal...
Oh, did McGruffy Wuffy get a tippy whippy?
I'm serious. We gotta move fast
Who's a
before...
good boy?
Is he a good boy? I'm just gonna go.
We won't go outside. You gotta go tinky poo poo.
I already went, okay? In the bathroom.
As long as people talk baby talk to dogs, you can count on Geico saving folks money. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on car insurance.
Applebee's to go. Order online and get $10 $10 off $30. Now that's even good in the neighborhood.
CoQ10 is the #1 cardiologist's recommended supplement for heart health. I take Cunol CoQ10. Why? Because Cunol has 3 times better absorption than regular CoQ10. Cunol, the better CoQ10.
For drug-free sinus relief, get Navage, the only nose cleaner with powered suction to flush out allergens, mucus, and germs.
I used to get so congested, but Navage cleans out all the stuff that makes me miserable so I can breathe again.
Now at CVS Pharmacy and Navage.com. You won't see these folks at the post office. They have businesses to run. They have passions to pursue. How do they avoid trips to the post office? Stamps.com. Mail letters. Ship packages. All the amazing services of the post office right on your computer. Get a 4-week trial plus $100 in extras, including postage and a digital scale. Go to stamps.com/TV and never go to the post office again.
Hi, I'm Annette, and I'm an actress. Under eye bags and wrinkles are so frustrating. I came across Plexiderm, and I was so excited. We have a model. His name is Richie, and all he's doing is taking a small amount. It's so powerful. That's all it takes. And what I love about Plexiderm is you don't have to worry about the injections, the expensive plastic surgeons, because this is something that you can do in the convenience of your own home.
I was a little skeptical, I am not going to lie, because I saw people online with it, and I'm like, yeah, right, that can't possibly work. Honestly, it really works.
I did this to my father at home, one eye, so that we can compare. 4 minutes, 34 seconds. The appearance of his under eye bag completely gone. We were screaming. It was so exciting and amazing. You have an event, you have any of those moments where you want to feel the best about yourself. The videos that you see are real. Those are the results you can expect to see.
Visit Plexiderm.com or call the number on your screen. Having moderate to severe plaque psoriasis is not always easy. It's a long-distance ride, and you have the determination to keep going. Humira has a proven track record of being prescribed for over 10 years. It's the #1 prescribed biologic by dermatologists. More than 250,000 patients have chosen Humira to fight their psoriasis, and they're not backing down. For most patients, your skin is the proof.
Humira can lower your ability to fight infections, including tuberculosis. Serious, sometimes fatal infections and cancers, including lymphoma, have happened, as have blood, liver, and nervous system problems, serious allergic reactions, and new or worsening heart failure. Before treatment, get tested for TB. Tell your doctor if you've been to areas where certain fungal infections are common, and if you've had TB, hepatitis B, are prone to infections, or have flu-like symptoms or sores. Don't start Humira if you have an infection.
Join over 250,000 people who have chosen Humira. Ask your dermatologist about Humira and go.
Welcome back. Let me ask you about some of your colleagues and what you think about them. Ted Cruz.
Yeah, great guy. I met him shortly after I was elected to the Senate before I had taken office. I felt like I had known him before that because we had a lot of common friends. We were both appellate litigators, and I had seen him argue at the Supreme Court. He and I share a lot in common ideologically. We both approach this job from the standpoint of looking at the Constitution and evaluating what it means. He's a good friend and a close ally.
And you both actually had to run against the establishment in order to get your nominations. Now, Utah has a very interesting system, a convention system. Virginia has it from time to time. That's a very difficult system to overcome. How did you do that?
Well, I started giving a series of speeches about the Constitution around the state of Utah, and it sort of caught hold. It came at a time when people were realizing the federal government was getting too big and too powerful. It was commanding too many resources from our society. It was overreaching in its power. The message caught hold, and it resonated with a lot of voters, and it resonated with the convention in the state of Utah. Now, in the convention, I didn't actually clinch the nomination. I had to face a primary, but the incumbent, Senator Bennett at the time, was defeated at convention, and so I faced a primary election opponent and won in the primary and then in the general.
And that was which year?
That was 2010.
And let me ask you about a couple other senators. Rand Paul.
Rand Paul is also a dear friend and a close ally. I got to know him when he and I were both running for office at the same time in 2010. I was in Kentucky on a fundraising trip, and I met him at a fundraiser. And I had read somewhere, some columnist somewhere had connected the two dots, and I had identified Mike Lee in Utah and Rand Paul in Kentucky, and said if Mike Lee and Rand Paul are both elected to the Senate, they'll become fast friends, and we did. He's a very committed libertarian and loves the Constitution.
Bernie Sanders.
Bernie Sanders is a great guy. He believes passionately in what he believes in. He and I don't agree on every issue, to put it mildly. He describes himself as a progressive independent who caucuses with the Democratic Party. I'm a constitutional conservative. We don't agree very often. Occasionally it happens.
Now, I would assume, like any group, club, organization, there's 100 of you. So some get along better than others. There's these caucuses, I guess, that you have, these lunches that you have, and so forth. Give us a little bit of a mind's eye into how this works. I guess there's wheeling and dealing, and some senators get angry at other senators, and some ally with other senators. How does that work?
It's a little bit like the Supreme Court, as we were talking about earlier. There are people who are not at all aligned politically, ideologically, but who get along great. The mainstream media would have you believe that Democrats and Republicans are constantly at odds with each other. There's constant bickering. There's this mindset that the problems in Washington are all associated with partisan gridlock. And I don't really think that's the problem. I don't see hatred. I don't see enmity between Democrats and Republicans based on their party affiliation, their ideological orientation. In fact, you don't get to be $21 trillion in debt. You don't get to the point where your government spends $4 trillion a year without a whole lot of Republicans and a whole lot of Democrats agreeing on a whole lot of things. So the idea that these parties are so ideologically at odds that they can't get anything done simply isn't true. It's what they do get done that we have to watch.
So they're very similar in some ways.
In many respects, yes. In many respects, they have been too similar. They've been too aligned, too willing to expand the size, the scope, the reach, the cost of the federal government. That has inured to the great detriment of the American people.
Well, I don't think I get along in your lunches very well. I'd be so furious I'd be throwing plates across the place.
Well, when you run for the United States Senate and get elected, I'll look forward to that. I'm sure they'll love you, though. They'll welcome you with open arms. And your contribution to the debate would be greatly appreciated and is much needed.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. We'll be right back.
This is the doorway to your dreams. Better known as the Honda Dream Garage Spring Event.
Really? You can open your doors to the outdoors
with a deal on a Honda Pilot.
Oh, look, here's one.
It's got room for up to 8. The interior is incredibly roomy.
Don't mind if I do.
The Honda Dream Garage Spring Event is on now. Get a great deal on the Pilot at KBB.com Best Buy in 2018.
Just one free hearing test at his local Miracle Ear helped Andrew hear more of the joy in her voice. Just one hearing test is all it took for him to hear more of her laugh and less of the background noise around him. For Helen, just one visit to her local Miracle Ear is all it took to learn how she can share more moments with her daughter. Just one free hearing test could help you hear more laughter, music, life. Call now. For a limited time, you can get $500 off Miracle Ear hearing aids.
Looks great, honey.
Right? Sometimes you need an expert.
I got it.
And sometimes...
Looks great, honey.
Right? Sometimes you need an expert.
I got it.
And sometimes those experts need experts.
On it.
And sometimes the expert needed needs insurance expertise.
It's all good. Steve, you're covered for general liability. And Paul, we got your back with workers' comp. Wow, it's like a party in here. Where are the hors d'oeuvres, right? Tartlets? We cover commercial vehicles, too. I think there's something wrong with your sink.
More energy?
Annie, what would you do if you had more energy?
Gosh. More energy? I'd probably be a happier guy when this was early.
Salsa dancing.
Energy equals happiness.
The potential for greater energy is already inside of you. To help you make the most of it, Super Beets concentrates an essential nutrient found in heart-healthy beets.
3 beets in here?
Oh my gosh, it's a superfood.
It's non-GMO, which makes me super happy.
Super Beets helps increase circulation and supports healthy blood pressure.
Some choppy waters with the announcement of stiff tariffs, threats of a trade war, and stomach-churning drops in the stock market. Joining me now to discuss it all, Treasury Secretary Stephen Mnuchin. Mrs. Secretary, welcome back to Fox News Sunday. Thank you. Great to be here with you. U.S. stocks just had their worst week in 2 years. The Dow fell more than 1,400 points. That's a 5.7% drop. What's going on, and how long will it last? Well, Chris, there's a lot of different things impacting the stock market, but I think the most important thing to focus on is the market will go up and down in the short term. The real important issue is where will it be longer term, and the market is still up an enormous amount since the election, and we're confident as we continue on our economic plans that will translate into the market doing better.
To talk about why it is dropping right now, 1,100 points of that drop came Thursday and Friday after President Trump announced that he's going to impose tariffs on $60 billion of Chinese exports. Are the markets wrong to react so negatively to the president's tariffs?
Well, Chris, I've never thought that the markets are necessarily efficient. There's a lot of things that went on last week, including the Fed. But as it relates to the tariffs, there's really been three parts of our economic plan, and we've been very consistent from day one. Tax reform, regulatory relief, and trade. And now we are executing on the third part of our plan. So I don't think anybody should be surprised. This is a president that absolutely believes in free trade, but wants free and fair trade, and has been very clear since our first meeting in Mar-a-Lago with President Xi that the trade deficit has to be addressed, that they need to open up their markets to our companies, and that's fair and free reciprocal trade.
But to press my point, are the markets wrong to be afraid of the president's tariffs and the impact it'll have on the economy?
I don't expect to see a big impact on the economy. We've been very careful in how we're doing this and what we're doing. But again, I think what we're doing is long-term very good for the economy, which it is pressing for free and fair trade. And to the extent that China is willing to open up their markets, which they're making all the right directions on, but if they open up their markets, it's an enormous opportunity for U.S. companies.
And of course, the fear is that that's not going to be the way they respond. The fear is that the response to the president's tariffs is going to be a trade war with China, and the day after the president announced his tariffs, China announced plans to impose its own tariffs on $3 billion in U.S. exports and the possibility of billions of dollars more in U.S. exports, whether it's American soybeans or Boeing jets. I know that you spoke with the Chinese vice premier yesterday, who, according to the Chinese news agency, said that China is prepared to defend its interests. Do you really believe Beijing is going to blink?
Well, it's not a question of blinking. I think we've been very clear in what we want, and they understand that. President Xi, Liu He have acknowledged that our shared objective is to reduce the trade deficit. So, as President Trump said, we're not afraid of a trade war, but that's not our objective. And I've had very productive conversations with the Vice Premier. He came to Washington. We've communicated several times since then. We continued to have a discussion the other night. And I think we're working on a pathway to see if we can reach an agreement as to what fair trade is for them to open up their markets, reduce their tariffs, stop forced technology transfer. These are all the things we want to do. But in a negotiation, you have to be prepared to take action, and that's what President Trump is doing.
So I just want to make sure I'm clear here, because the president announced $60 billion in tariffs. The Chinese talked about $3 billion and the possibility of more. And as I say, the vice premier talked about defending Beijing's interests. Are you suggesting that none of this is going to happen, that you're going to be able to avoid it, and that none of these tariffs will actually go into effect?
Well, we are going to proceed with our tariffs. We're working on that. We're also working on investment restrictions, but we're simultaneously having negotiations with the Chinese to see if we can reach an agreement. As the president has said, we want to cut the trade deficit $100 billion over the next year. We want to eliminate forced joint ventures, forced technology, and we're having very productive conversations with them. I'm cautiously hopeful we reach an agreement, but if not, we are proceeding with these tariffs. We are not putting them on hold unless we have an acceptable agreement that the president signs off on.
Earlier this month, the president announced different tariffs on aluminum and steel imports into this country. And one of his top advisors on trade, Peter Navarro, was in this program right after they were announced, and he said that this was going to be a global imposition of tariffs on every nation that sends metals to this country. Take a look.
You have to understand, Chris, as soon as he starts exempting countries, he has to raise the tariff on everybody else. As soon as he exempts one country, his phone starts ringing from the heads of state of other countries.
But that's not what happened. The administration has now exempted Canada and Mexico and the European Union and South Korea and almost all of the major exporters of aluminum and steel. I guess my question is, what was the point of announcing global tariffs in the first place when you took them all away?
Well, Chris, I think the strategy's worked, quite frankly. So we announced the tariffs. We said we were going to proceed. But again, we said we'd simultaneously negotiate. And I'm pleased to say Ambassador Lighthizer reached a very productive understanding with South Korea, not just on these tariffs, but on the KORUS trade agreement overall. We expect to sign that agreement soon. And there is a quota. So South Korea will reduce the amount of steel that they send into the United States as part of this. So I think this is an absolute win-win. When I was at the G20 last week, I had many discussions with my counterparts. So where we've put a pause on tariffs, we're negotiating.
President would unleash strong economic growth. Here is the president.
To get it going the way I really want, where we have GDP getting up to 4, 5, and even 6%, because I think that's possible.
But the Federal Reserve just came out with its projection, and it's not 4 or 5 or 6% growth. It's 2.7% this year, declining to 2.4% in 2019. Again, this is the projection of the Federal Reserve. Question, what happened to the boom?
Well, I think we've absolutely had a boom, and that's why the Fed raised their projection, 2.7. It was substantially lower. Part of the reason why they're projecting to raise interest rates is because of the exceptional performance of the economy. And as I've repeatedly said, our objective is 3% or higher. The president would like us to get higher than that, but at 3%, there's trillions of dollars of additional revenue to the government and tens of trillions of economic growth. So
they're saying for the next 2 years, the Fed is you're not going to reach 3%. It's going to be 2.7 and then 2.4.
Well, again, as you know, the Fed is independent of us, and I respect their projections. Our projections are higher, but I think what to focus on is their projections are up significantly. And we've now had we've had 2 quarters of 3% GDP. We are well on our way to the 3% growth. And tax reform and tax cuts are a big part of that. We're seeing enormous investment back in the United States and great success on that.
Do you think the Fed is raising interest rates too quickly?
Well, again, I respect Fed independence, so I'm not going to comment on that. But what I would say is the market expects interest rates are going to go up. That's built into the forward curve. So the only question is how fast do they raise them and where does it stop? And I think that's something that they will balance as they see economic growth. I think the Fed is very committed to make sure that they don't cut off economic growth.
When the corporate tax bill was passed, you and the president promised that most of the benefits were going to go to workers, but that's not, in fact, what has happened so far. I want to put up this chart. According to one study, S&P companies have given employees $5.2 billion in bonuses and higher wages, the kinds of things you and the president talked about. But at the same time, they spent $157 billion on stock buybacks. So far, the tax cuts are going to shareholders. They're not going to workers.
Well, Chris, first of all, we're only a couple of months into this. So I think you have over 4.5 million Americans that have received special bonuses. That's an enormous situation. I was at Boeing last week with the president, or 2 weeks ago, viewing the factory. There were a lot of happy workers there. I was at Apple, who's committed to put $350 billion back into the United States. These are massive commitments. And as I've commented, there's nothing wrong with share buybacks. Share buybacks are just an allocation of capital. If a company can't effectively use that capital, it will return it to shareholders. In many cases, that's pensions and other large investors who then invest that capital back into companies that need the capital.
So are you disappointed that $5 billion is going to workers and $150 billion is going to shareholders?
It's not an equivalent comparison. So again, that $150 billion that's going back to shareholders gets recycled into the economy. The $5 billion that's going to workers is an enormous amount of money that we didn't even expect to see right away. What we've expected to see is over the course of the next year, wages increase something like $4,500, and that's a lot of money. So I think you're
seeing absolutely the impact that we thought, and more so, on the tax plan. Finally, we had some drama on Friday when President Trump threatened for a few hours to veto the $1.3 trillion spending bill that Congress had passed, and then eventually signed it. And when he signed it, not very happily, he issued this warning.
I say to Congress, I will never sign another bill like this again. I'm not going to do it again.
Question, what is the president saying? Is he saying that he'll not sign another omnibus spending bill, that it's got to be individual spending bills for each department? And this is something, the Republicans are in control of the House and the Senate, and the bill that was passed, aren't they responsible for this big omnibus grab bag spending bill? Not at all. So first of all, as you know, you need bipartisan support in the Senate to get the bill passed. So even though the Republicans control the Senate, they couldn't pass this alone. It was a difficult decision for the president, and I understand that, because the president's main priority was to get money for the military. Given everything that's going on in the world, that is absolutely critical. And the Democrats held us up. Our original budget was we would keep everything else balanced, but the Democrats demanded a massive increase in non-military spending. And that's going to balloon the deficit, and that's something we're going to have to deal with. I was going to say, that's going to happen next time. When the next spending bill comes up in October, they're going to be demanding parity as well. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but it is reality. Well, it doesn't need to be reality, and I'm not going to comment on what the president will do, but as you heard him say, he's not planning on doing this again. I think they should give the president a line item veto. These things should be looked at unconstitutional by the Supreme Court, sir. Well, again, Congress could pass a rule, that allows them to do it. No, sir, it'd be a constitutional amendment. Chris, we don't need to get into a debate in terms of there's different ways of doing this. My comment is it's clear what happened. The Democrats, in order to get us military spending, demanded a massive increase in non-military spending. And the president made the decision this time that was worth it, because military spending, given what's going on in Iran, in North Korea, in Venezuela, in Russia, all around the world where we're using sanctions, we need to make sure we have a military that has the necessary resources. Secretary Mnuchin, thank you. Thanks for your time this weekend. I always appreciate your willingness to take all our questions and answer them. Thank you, sir. Always good to talk. It's great to be here. Up next, more shakeups at the White House as President Trump names former Ambassador John Bolton as his new national security advisor. We'll bring back the panel to discuss the new horse on his national security team.
If you love your friends and family, give them a meal that will truly be appreciated. The Omaha Steaks Savings Celebration Package. Sold separately, this package is filled with $193 worth of great food for the combo price of just $49.99. That's 74% off on this limited time offer. The Omaha Steaks Savings Celebration Package includes 4 tender top sirloin steaks, 4 extra thick boneless pork chops, 4 juicy boneless chicken breasts, 4 classic juicy Omaha Steaks burgers, and 4 gourmet jumbo franks. Dessert is 4 caramel apple tartlets. Your order will be delivered straight to your home or the destination of your choice to enjoy with friends and family. As a special thanks from us to you, if you order right now, we'll include 4 additional Omaha Steaks burgers free. That's 8 total. You get it all. The Omaha Steaks Savings Celebration Package. A $193 value for just $49.99. Enjoy the lowest pricing of the season with the Savings Celebration Package from Omaha Steaks today.
Mary and Shirley both need oxygen. Shirley lost her freedom the day she went on oxygen. But Mary has the brand new ultra-compact Inogen 1 G4 Oxygen Concentrator from Inogen. It's the smallest and lightest model we've ever made. Shirley is forced to miss out on everyday activities. Mary fully enjoys her life. Shirley has to wait for tank deliveries and worries about running out of oxygen. But Mary's Inogen 1 G4 makes its own oxygen, so she'll always have the oxygen she needs anytime, anywhere. Shirley finally listened to Mary, and now has more freedom too. It's time for you to reclaim your freedom and independence with the Inogen 1 G4. Act now to start your 30-day risk-free trial. This is a limited time offer, so don't wait and don't accept substitutions. The sooner you call, the sooner you can say goodbye to heavy oxygen tanks for good and reclaim the freedom and independence you deserve. Call now for your 30-day risk-free trial. Call 800-945-0600.
Ladies and gentlemen, we welcome change and openness. We believe that freedom and security go together. And there is one sign the Soviets can make that would be unmistakable. Open this gate. Tear down this wall.
Targeting the source of the ache by relaxing tense muscles and providing decompression that can help to restore the nutrients to the discs, reduce nerve pressure, and realign the spine.
I can get on it, hang upside down for 10 or 15 minutes, get up, and my back pain is gone. It's amazing.
Instantly, I was feeling the effects from it. My lower back was feeling better in the mornings, and I just kind of felt rejuvenated getting off it every day.
Medical and scientific studies around the world have shown the benefits of inversion, and over 2 million people have put their trust in Teeter for a better back and a better body. I'm over 72, and I feel great.
Teeter meets UL's tough consumer safety testing standard. No one else even comes close to Teeter quality and performance. Now you can try the latest Teeter in your home for 30 days for only $14.95 with free shipping. We'll also include 2 of our most popular accessories, which add acupressure massage and deepens the lumbar stretch. Plus, you'll receive the Healthy Back and Core system. But that is not all. If you call now, we'll also upgrade your order to free expedited processing.
This thing is mine. You can't have it. It's one of my most valuable possessions. It really is.
Trust Teeter Hang-Ups for a better back, better body.
You're looking at the #1 cause of lung cancer. That's why the Surgeon General issued this warning. Now you're looking at the #1 cause of lung cancer for non-smokers. That's why the Surgeon General issued this warning. Radon is an invisible radioactive gas that seeps inside your home from underground. Whether you smoke or not, radon can cause lung cancer. Protect your family. Have your home tested. Call 1-800-SOS-RADON. Radon problems can be fixed.
If people sense that you're not pushing an agenda, they're going to rely on you. Having been in this business so long, you're able to detect what is real and what's just political noise. For the first time in 150 years, there is no pet in the White House. But the Vice President and his family have brought a menagerie to Washington, including a dog, a cat, and a bunny, which brings us to our Power Player of the Week.
He'll sit and hold a pose and wait till you get a lot of shots. I mean, it's really adorable. He's kind of a prima donna. Hey, Marlin.
Karen Pence is talking about the family's pet bunny. The main character in a children's book she and her daughter Charlotte have written, called Marlon Bundo's Day in the Life of the Vice President. But before we get to the book, there's Marlon's story. Charlotte was working on a college film project and needed a bunny.
I asked the owner how much for the bunny, and they said to make him an offer. And so it became this Godfather joke with my friends.
Marlon Brando became Marlon Bundo, who escapes from his cage just as 2 teens break out of their troubles.
He's kind of a metaphor. He's very deep.
In 2017, when the family moved to Washington, photographers spotted Marlon being carried off Air Force Two.
For some reason, it became this phenomenon, that, oh my gosh, the Pences have a bunny. And so Charlotte thought it'd be a lot of fun to start Marlon's own Instagram account.
Last May, Marlon made his first official appearance at an event honoring military families, and clearly upstaged the Vice President.
Okay. You know who this is, don't you? Whisper it, whisper it.
Marlon.
Yes. Marlon, this is Chris Wallace. Mr. Chris Wallace. This is the BOTUS.
Yes, that stands for Bunny of the United States. My family has had a bunch of bunnies, and none of them were ever as well behaved as
He's
Marlon.
good, yeah. We think he's kind of, he likes the spotlight a little bit.
And so was born the idea for a book about Marlon following Grandpa, the Vice President, around Washington for a full day of meetings.
Mrs. Pence, who's an accomplished artist, did the illustrations, while Charlotte wrote the story in verse.
Allow me to introduce myself. I am Marlon Bundo Pence. I live with my family here at the Vice President's residence.
The Pences are donating proceeds from the book to charity. Charlotte to fight human trafficking, Mrs. Pence to support art therapy.
When our soldiers come back and can't talk about trauma, art therapy is something that can help bring those emotions to the surface where then they can deal with them.
Charlotte says Marlon brings bunny lovers together, erasing political lines. But comedian John Oliver came out with his own book, Trolling the Vice President, with proceeds going to LGBT and AIDS groups.
Our story is about Marlon Bundo falling in love with another boy rabbit because our Marlon Bundo is gay.
On Marlon's Instagram, Marlon actually said, the only thing better than one bunny book that benefits charity is 2 bunny books that benefit charity.
Marlon can be seen on Instagram flipping the pages of his book. The mother and daughter are clearly enjoying their collaboration.
Every time I see a picture of a kid reading the book, it just makes my day.
One of the first pictures she sent me on her phone was the binding where it says Pence, Pence. So it was really sweet.
The Pences are already talking about a second book. Charlotte says Marlon has a few more adventures up his sleeve. And that's it for today. Have a great week, and we'll see you next Fox News Sunday.
On our Buzz Meter this Sunday, the media mount a frontal assault on John Bolton, tapped by the president as national security advisor, portraying the longtime Fox News contributor as a danger to the nation.
John Bolton, the last person in the world who should be anywhere near the national security bureaucracy. We are stumbling possibly towards an apocalyptic war that will, kill millions of people, turn America into a pariah and our way of life.
John Bolton is replacing H.R. McMaster today, and my goodness, MSNBC and others were in a total meltdown. World War III is about to happen.
Major breaking news tonight that has a lot of people very, very worried.
They may not all agree, but Ambassador Bolton is a guy who will get the message right, and will take the pressure off the White House of always having to put that out there.
Our journalists making any attempt at balance in covering the hawkish and controversial Bolton. With 60 Minutes set to air its Stormy Daniels interview tonight, television shines its spotlight on the president's female accusers.
This is the party of evangelicals, yet they don't seem to have hit their breaking point. With a president who is locked in a legal battle with a porn actress, a Playboy model, and a reality TV contestant.
I'm not sure the alleged affair or probable affair, whatever you want to call it, is having any impact on the president.
This after CNN interviewed former Playboy model Karen McDougal about her allegations of an affair.
Who ended the relationship?
I did.
Why?
I was just feeling so guilty. When you have feelings in a relationship and you cared about somebody, why would you want to destroy their life any more than you might have already destroyed their life?
Does the public care what Donald Trump, the businessman, did more than a decade ago? And how is Anderson Cooper handling their stories? Plus, a major crisis at Facebook as Mark Zuckerberg admits to mistakes in allowing a company to engage in a massive misuse of personal data.
What happened? What went wrong?
So this was a major breach of trust, and I'm really sorry that this happened.
And the company, Cambridge Analytica, under fire after an undercover media investigation finds top executives talking about offering politicians bribes and hookers. But what are the ethics of a hidden camera probe? I'm Howard Kurtz, and this is Media Buzz. When the president abruptly fired H.R. McMaster and replaced him with Fox News contributor John Bolton, the former UN ambassador didn't know this was being announced until shortly before he appeared on Fox.
The way that you speak about Russia is quite a bit more hawkish than the way that the president does.
I've never been shy about what my views are, but frankly, what I've said in private now is behind me, at least effective April the 9th, and the important thing is what the president says and what advice I give him.
Joining us now to analyze the coverage of another tumultuous week at the White House, Guy Benson, political editor at townhall.com and a Fox News contributor.
Susan Furicchio, chief congressional correspondent for the Washington Examiner. And Mo Lethe, a former DNC staffer who runs Georgetown University's Institute of Politics and is a Fox News contributor. Guy, John Bolton is a controversial person. Big booster of the Iraq War. Talks about military options against North Korea to stop the regime from getting nukes. Became a recess appointee as UN ambassador because the Republican Senate wouldn't confirm as George W. Bush's pick. But some of these stories portray him as being, 5 minutes from starting an apocalyptic war.
Right, with millions of people dying. First of all, it's difficult to transition to talking about John Bolton when the Open mentioned porn stars, hookers, and all of that's to come.
Fair point.
But I think what's interesting about Bolton's resume, and we've seen some people on other networks, including one of your counterparts, focusing in on his job description as being a Fox News contributor. Now, I happen to be very fond of Fox News contributors, but John Bolton was also the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations. He held 2 significant positions in the State Department prior to that.
He goes back to the Reagan administration.
Yeah, in the Department of Justice. He is someone who is deeply, deeply informed on foreign policy issues. Whether you agree with his advice that he'll be giving the president or not, we should be acknowledging the qualifications that he has for the job and not getting overheated, because you may say, and I may agree, that he's a little bit too hawkish for my taste. That is different than making these calamitous predictions about impending doom for the world. People tune that out.
Along those lines, Mo, HuffPost called him a warmonger. Slate says, literally, it's time to panic. New York Times, part of the most radically aggressive